Pause record. All right, very cool. So again, I want to thank everybody for taking some time out of their day to join me and Jen Goldman. We're covering a very important topic, and actually, I reached out to Jen because our topic is something that a lot of advisors have been asking me about lately, and I couldn't think of a better person to tackle this topic. So Jen, thank you for being here and spending time with us. Today, we're going to talk about expanding your team. As a business owner of 11 years and having run departments at other companies before, I can tell you I liken growth to an inchworm. And what I mean by that is you create business, you create revenue, and now you have to reinvest in expanding the team to take on that added, to create capacity for that added work that you've got to do. So for a lot of business owners and a lot of advisors, I think a lot of people find it, I don't know, frustrating is not the word, but very, very difficult. Not only you gain this revenue, which is your goal, and now you've got to invest that back in your team, but also making the right decisions, right? How do you put somebody in place that you are confident is going to read your culture? You're confident is going to bring something new and creative and progressive to your team, and it's just the right pick, right? So I've been getting a lot of questions on recruiting and hiring lately from the advisors that I talk to. And so I thought a topic on this, a webinar on this topic would be great. Now, Jen and I have known each other a couple of years. We work together with a couple of common clients, one of which is here today. And so I've had an opportunity to work with Jen as a business consultant. And I'll tell you what, very, very, Jen, like you are so meticulous and detail oriented. I don't want to say it's the opposite of me because that's not the opposite of me. Just that I have a little, my point there being that you fold into a team so well, because everything you do is upfront and transparent, and so well documented, and you bring such experience. I don't want to say so many years, but such great experience to the table. I couldn't think of a better person than you, Jen Goldman, to join me for this conversation. So once again, thanks for being here today. And thank you for lending your wisdom to me and the people who are registered and who have joined us this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for you going in the river because I can't get that out of my head. I think it's so great. And I'm grateful for this opportunity because you're hearing it and I'm hearing it. And I hear it with a lot of pain attached to it. So anything we can do to address it and let this go out into the world and to other, peers and owners and leaders is all good.
Yeah, very cool. So we're going to talk about when to make a hire. When do you know it's time to add to your team, right? And then when you know it's time to add to your team, who to hire, and not just the person, but also the role within the company, right? Or do we need somebody who's licensed that can take a load off of the advisor group, or is it more an operations person? And then finally, as you're diving into growth, um, how do you approach that, right? Who's the right person? Is that an internal promotion? Is that an external hire? Is that in some cases you can outsource a lot of the work that needs to be done? So anybody, if you have questions, the chat is open, the Q&A is open. We're going to lean on Jen's expertise today. I'm sure I've got plenty to interject here, Jen, so I'll jump in there. But I'll also bring any questions forward from our guests today. So let me kick off. I wrote them down because it's easier that way.
I got
So
my notes to the side, guys. If I'm looking over, it's because I got my notes up here.
I have a little mouse, so you can't see me looking down.
Worst creative paper.
Yeah. Okay, so Jen, let's talk about when is the right time to hire. So you and I, in prepping for this, we talked about a few indicators. Workload is definitely one of them, right? Do you have capacity issues, revenue, client growth? Let's talk about that. What are some of the indicators that you see in the RAs that you work with when it's time to expand that team?
Yeah. Those are all the revenue, the workload, right? The growth. I would say the word disengagement. If you are not happy to get out of bed in the morning and do the responsibilities that are in front of you or the roles, let's just talk about the hats that you wear, or somebody else isn't, and they're not passionate about it, that's a dead giveaway. Like there's a problem in the room, and that doesn't mean you solve it today. It just means you've got to start talking about it. So let me add the disengagement onto the revenue, the workload, the client growth. Uh, another another thing is when you're working on, and we're going to get into this a little bit on processes, but if you're working on continuously improving, right? Like you're thinking about how can I be better? How can we serve better? How we can be internal, and you're redoing processes, you're going to uncover areas of a process where nobody has the skills,
Right.
you know? So like, what do you do with that? And that's, we're talking about training, and, or do you bring in from somebody from the outside? So I, again, on top of the three, that revenue, work, and growth and disengagement, let's add the skills. If there's lacking the skills for the larger business you're becoming, then you have to make a decision.
That's an awesome addition, right? And the preface to that is if you're working on your processes and find that there's gaps in those processes that you don't have the expertise to fulfill. Um, you know, many advisors are cut of the same cloth. Um, in working with firms, what do you find some of that skill set gap to be? Are there commonalities there when you're working through processes that, like, oh my gosh, maybe because people who are joining us today, they won't even know that they don't have that skill
That's,
set if they're
that's
not
right.
working on those processes. So are there commonalities that they can see within their own businesses?
Yeah. Without causing any due pain on who's listening, uh, there, there's two sleeves, and it comes from the top. And if you're a visionary, you can't implement.
Yeah.
And if you're an integrator, you sometimes have trouble with the visionary portion, and you need both. And that, the reason I say it comes from the top is because most businesses start with the top person, right? Then they're getting a partner, then they're adding people in. But what they're not doing is acknowledging what they're not good at. They're just adding in what they think they need, because when you're a small business, it's just about capacity, right? It's about like, if I don't bring somebody in, we're going to drop a ball. That's going to be bad for our reputation. We're not going to get referrals, right? So I would say that if we had to like make it simple, um, again, the visionary can't integrate and implement, and the integrator can't go big in the vision. They're tied too much. Their feet are on the ground too solidly. So those are the big top skills. Then it comes into critical thinking. This is a really tough one. This is what we're struggling with, to be honest, is working with businesses where we don't have too many critical thinkers on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I mean by critical thinkers, and I use my hands when I can't use my whiteboards. Sorry, guys. Um, how do you connect the dots, right? Like every area of the business, think of the business like a constellation of stars. And you have the marketing star, and then you have the biz dev star, and then you have the client star, and then you have the tech star. Like there's all these stars, and trying to see when you make a change to one, how it impacts another, and then realize you have a staff gap. That that is, I call that critical thinking. Others might have a different word for it. That's where, when we need to start thinking about who we're going to hire in, and do they have that, because that person is great, right? When they think of all the different pieces of the business, then everything improves together.
Yeah, I love, from the perspective that social advisors and myself personally comes to the firms that we work with. Ours is marketing and business development, right? We're focused on growth, and so many, and I'm sure a lot of people on with us today, started their career maybe in a wirehouse and setting, where all that back office stuff was taken care of for them. It was process driven. It was being run by MBAs from top universities. I mean, it was locked down, and then as this industry continues to evolve to an independent place, all of a sudden, all that back office becomes your own, unless you join. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's aggregates out there that are helpful with those
Mhm.
things, and we know a few of them. Um, when you find yourself so submerged as that business developer, I'll use rainmaker as a term,
Yeah.
as that person, but you're submerged in the day-to-day execution of the business, the working in versus working on. That's a huge piece of it, right? If you're the breadwinner for that business, if growth is on you, if you're responsible for that, but you find 80% of your day is spent on tasks for clients, wow, that should be an eye opener, right? It can't.
That's right. But when do you spend the time to take a step back? And here's the other catch, and not, we talked about not be emotional, like not be emotional about almost documenting what you're actually working on and doing, and then taking a breather and coming back and going, oh my God, the lost opportunity by me working in the business versus on the business. Or maybe the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to work on the business anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to be out knocking on doors per se, you know what I mean? And doing business development. That's not where I get my kicks.
Yeah.
I think we fear being honest. And yet, and this is where we get into trouble with hiring. Because if we're not honest, we don't really know who we need to hire, what kind of skills we need on the team, what kind of personality.
It almost becomes avoidance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. If I could
Absolutely. So
break
how do you
myself
get
down.
away from that?
Yeah.
And, that's why we always joke about our markers and our whiteboards. And yes, I know who's smiling right now on the call, who knows this, but the whiteboards and writing, because we just go into freak out mode if we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Hence your whiteboard behind you. Like you
I
couldn't
love
have
that
played it
report.
better, Charlie.
I write with both arms some
That's
days. I'm moving so fast on this thing. I love it.
We did not plan this, guys.
no, that's there all the time. And
That's
I'll
right.
have a thought and I'll be like, okay, I got to get that down. Otherwise it's going to be fleeting. Right. So
That's right.
yeah, I don't know. This is, yeah, it's not part of the stage. It's every day.
But it's the reality, right? Like everybody saw my office. I have two massive whiteboards. I have five smaller ones on the floor, constantly doing it, because if it stays here, you're not going to get the clarity around the hiring. You won't.
Yeah. Okay. So, in this segment, the when to hire,
Yeah.
and this may cross over into the who to hire also,
Mhm.
but when you identify that skill, right, like that you're looking for, maybe I don't want to be a business developer anymore and I need somebody in that role on my team, or the opposite of that. I'm stuck so far in the business, I've got to get out in front of it again. How do you know whether that should be a person, whether that should be a firm that you can outsource to?
Mhm.
Um, is there, do you have any tips on that?
I'll tell you what I do. Take her to leave it. The first thing I always do is try to optimize every part of that area of the business. So by optimizing, I mean cut out as much work as possible. So either eliminating it, we're automating it, we're turning on systems with each other. We're just trying to shed it so then I can clearly see what's left there. And then by seeing what's left, then we'll know, is this an outside provider? Because to be fair, I think what we try to do is we try to look for the unicorn when we hire, which is we want all these different skills and abilities in one, and it's not possible. So more often than not, when we look at that, we start to say it needs to be an outsource provider that brings a team of people with the skills versus an on-site hire.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's a really good point, right? So to hire a marketer at your business, you hire one person with a subset of skills, and define parameters on those skills.
that's right.
By hiring a marketing firm, and I'm using ours as an example, right?
Mhm.
Now you hire a team of people who are designers and creative copywriters and can build a WordPress website
I was just
and
gonna say, and the technology with it, right? Versus like a client service person
yeah,
who's there to engage with the client, serve them well. The communications are more simple avenues. It's phone or email, right? Like there's not as much. That is a more defined role and set of responsibilities. That is more appropriate for a hire, a full-time hire.
yeah.
It's very much, you're not asking them to come in and serve clients, but also write a marketing plan, also go out and sell. Also, the list isn't so vast that it's just a unicorn that you have to find.
Yeah, we had a recent experience, and I'll, protect the innocent and all this, right? But we had a recent experience. We lost a key employee, and it turns out that was okay. Sometimes, it's in the moment, it's like, oh gosh, how
Yes.
do we make this up, right? And then you've got a solution for it. We did not fulfill that position, but I'll tell you exactly why we lost that key employee. Um, that person was really good at executing on a process. Um, Clients loved working with that person. We got great feedback, but the moment I said, okay, we want to innovate this process and get better at what we do, they self-identified. I'm not the person to innovate. And actually they departed. It wasn't our choice, because I think we could have gotten them there, but they did not want to go through that exercise, right? And so that was really painful and not something I expected at all. Like I thought this person was the right person for that innovation, not just the fulfillment, but the innovation of that role. And so the departure was a shock to me. Turns out everything was okay as a result of it. That's probably 6 weeks ago at this point. Um, we'll hire for that gap, but I'm slow, Jen, in doing it, right? So there was a moment of panic. Who do we know? Was the first
Yes.
question I asked myself. Who do we know that we can slot into this? And to your point, we took a step back and looked at the processes. We're able to refine and understood that we do outsource a little bit of it, but understood that we could outsource 10% of it and
Mhm.
tackle the other 90% internally with the team that we had.
Yeah. But
So
this brings up the good question though, hiring versus training up. A lot of the times we get businesses that say, we lack capacity at this level of authority. Okay. And I'll say, all right, well, what about instead giving those higher, let's say the authority is mid level, let's call it a mid level authority. Why not train somebody else up to that mid level authority and hire somebody under them? That's like mind blowing. Trying out your peoples first, seeing where they're willing to be trained up and have passion for that is the first go. Like I think that's really what you just talked about, but you didn't define it that way is you wanted to train them up. They didn't want to be trained up, but at least give them that opportunity. So when you think you want to hire, before you go hire, if there's a lot of authority and responsibility with that position, go to the team first and see if anyone else would like to try for it. Think about the big corporations, and not everybody's been a part of that. Like you, we've been a part of large corporations. The deal was internal hiring all the time. You would apply to another job in another department before you ever, left the company or the company said you're not a fit. You so I think when you say when to hire, again, capacity, skill gaps, disengagement, right? Like somebody is not jiving with what they're asked to do. Revenue is revenue is a lag though. When you have revenue, that means you already have work usually.
yeah,
It's very rare when a business says, well, we have a lot more revenue, but we have less clients. That's just with we dream of that maybe, but that's not happening. Um, but I think it's the who that is the harder part. And at what level we're hiring into.
yeah, agreed. Agreed. Let me remind our guests today, and the room continued to fill up. So we got a great lot of
Yeah,
people. So
more. Okay.
yeah, thank you very much for being here. Chat, Q&A. If you guys have questions right now, I'm generating them, but I'd love to hear from you. If you got questions for Jen or for me, certainly put them in the chat or Q&A, and we'll absolutely get to them. Jen, talk about some pitfalls of hiring too early, and then the secondary question to that is too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to think about this one. And so I'm glad we had talked about it in a little bit in advance. The too early to me is, thanks, Trevor. The too early to me feels like somebody didn't take time to write a solid job description with clear responsibilities. Like I'm gonna call it like a shiny object thing, right? We have this problem, everybody's burning up, we don't have capacity, we're just gonna hire. And to be fair, this industry has a lot of reoccurring revenue built into it, right? These companies that you guys are a part of. So you can do this with less risk. Now, if you're in a business where you don't have that reoccurring revenue that's super sticky, this is a whole different discussion.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You don't get burned too often by too early, usually, except when you rush to hire the wrong person, which ties right back into the responsibilities. So the risk with the too early is they're not the right person for the culture. They don't have the brain power at the level you need them to have. Maybe they don't have this zest for learning and change and continuous improvement if that's part of your culture. And you have to let them go. And I think people in general are loyal to a fault. And I'm one of those. You can see when that person isn't right, but you don't let them go soon enough.
Yeah, how much of that is your loyalty and how much of that is the fear that of the gap that was there before the hire,
That's correct.
returning, having to start from square one?
And let's add a third, the money and labor time it took to get that hire.
Yep.
It's expensive to hire. And I'm not talking about recruiting costs necessarily. I'm literally talking about the time you took to put everything together, to go through the interviews, to check the references, to onboard them and give them some semblance of training in the first 30 days or 90. That is a very expensive proposition. I know there's stats out there, and anybody in true HR would talk about this. It is very expensive to onboard and offboard somebody in 90 to 180 days.
Yes, it is. And then to start
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
And think about your clients too. Gosh forbid this is a client facing person. That's a tough one to explain.
Yeah, we've experienced that a couple of times over the last 11 years. Yeah.
So have I.
And there's attrition that goes with it.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit. We're talking about when, right? Let's talk about
Yeah.
who. Let's
Yeah.
move into who. Technical skills as a given, you know what technical skills are required for a certain role that you're hiring for. What are some of the soft skills, Jen, that you see are important in hiring? You know, we can talk about company culture and, you know, yeah. So
Communication, communication, communication. Do you over communicate, under communicate? Are you a verbal communicator versus an auditory or I mean, there's so many different ways to communicate. You do want to figure that out in advance of hiring someone, whether it's assessments and testing or just trying different things out with them. The critical thinking portion, connecting the dots and the constellation star image. Can they, when you work on one thing, can they tie it into something else? And by the way, in the industry of finance, that is absolutely crucial in almost every position. It doesn't matter whether you're an ops or you're client facing, you have to be able to connect the dots.
well, and I think that speaks directly to, you know, the recent departure that I was talking about, right? So I thought we had somebody that was really growth mindset, and reality is they wanted to show up at 9 o'clock. And listen, this is no, I'm not. This is not bad. This just is. They wanted to show up at 9 o'clock, have the set task for the day, and be done at 5. And we have to know what we can expect. And I didn't do a very good job of that, thinking that this was the person for the innovation role. But we have to know what we can expect in that person and what their desire out of it as well. Talk a little bit about company culture as a
Well, yeah, the thing about culture when we get into businesses is we can talk about it, but I don't think we talk about all the aspects of culture. I think we talk about missions and aspirations and values and like these usual, and some businesses smaller don't have that. They just don't have it even written down, much less. But I also think the culture of self accountability, right? The culture of how do we deal with fails? Do we celebrate lessons learned, wins, like this concept of trust? We say we trust each other with integrity, like we use these big words, but I don't, yeah, how do you test on the who to hire in the culture if you don't even have your culture written down? That's kind of a tough one.
Well, and for those people who are at small firms or maybe solopreneurs that are joining us today, like mission and vision and values, they almost seem, I can only speak from my personal experience, right? When we were a 2 or 3 year old company, like, oh, that stuff doesn't matter. We're just charging forward. Wow, when you
Oh,
can align your actions around your mission and your values, it changes everything.
that's right.
And so don't discredit if you're listening and and you can identify with what I'm saying, don't discredit how important those things are in your business, right? Identifying that mission, identifying your values, not only for, you know, some of it's useful forward facing with marketing, right? Some of it
Yep.
is, but I would say the majority of it is directly in line with what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Like, um,
Yep.
I'm gonna, when we were a young business, and I'll, real quick here, I departed a job Carmen and I, my wife, we didn't have a lot of money in the bank. And I said, babe, give me 60 days. Let me see if, I know advisors need help with this, right? So in 60 days, we landed 2 or 3 clients. We were still kind of feeling our way what that was, but all of a sudden we got business to the point where, we had to hire we had to make our first hire. Carmen and I were working really hard at it. We had to make our first hire. We hired a friend because it was the easiest person, because we were late to the game, because while there was revenue coming in, we didn't have a lot of padding to be able to absorb that training time on a high priced person who could have moved us forward faster. It was a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
So we learned very quickly, year 2 or year 3, the hiring process became a lot more stringent. Yeah, so that was, but
But here's the trick, in my opinion. Marketing is maybe for more clients, but it is absolutely for hiring. I think we've lost that. We've forgotten that. We might read it in Inc. magazine or other magazines about it, but we don't do it ourselves. If the who to hire, they find you.
yeah,
They find you. And that's really what you want. Okay. I'm not saying it's not out there, but if you have your purpose, your values, your actions, like we believe everybody should, volunteer to charity. We believe that everybody should communicate with honesty and open integrity. We run transparent meeting. Like I'm giving you all the jargon, but like if you're talking about that, the people that you want, the who's, will find you. And that's where I'd like it to be versus this shiny object where we're rushing or we're hiring whoever kind of walks in the door versus getting to choose. Yeah, so I think we all know, well, maybe I'm making an assumption. I think most of you know what type of person you want in terms of skills and personality. I don't think you have enough to choose from. And that's what we have to change.
great. Okay, so someone comes in with their CV or their resume, they sit down, have an interview. We've all heard this, right? That's the best they're ever going to be. Like that's, they're going to increase skills, they're going to learn more about your business and be able to help you in greater depth, but they're representing themselves the absolute best they're ever going to be represented.
Mhm. If they show up.
Well, that's a good disqualifier. That makes it easy, right?
That's an easy
Yeah.
one.
But how do you weed through kind of that front end BS
Yeah.
to make sure that in month 6 and month 12 and month 18, you've still got the quality of the person that you met that day?
Yeah. You know what? Peer to peer. I just, the list of questions that you're going to ask, you ask everyone you know that ever has to interview somebody for their best questions, and then you compile your list. When you ask them, you will uncover. That's one. Number two, we are a big fan for anyone who works with us of PXT, and there's even better assessments coming out now. I'm not, don't make money on this PXT. I'm just telling you need to know their interests, their passions, and their skills all in one assessment. And frankly, I cannot wait till they add on executive functioning onto it. That's coming. So that's another thing that you want to put into play. And I think this concept of you or your team only interviewing is a little short. I always tell firms, get an outside person to also interview them.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like maybe it's a client that's a business owner or an ex-business owner or a coach or a teacher. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get them to do it because they're going to put on a different face and personality for that person.
Yeah, we haven't used PXT, but I'll look at it for sure. And if there is
Yeah.
I'll send a link out with the recording, in fact. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for tools, and I don't know if they've got a free module or what they've got, but
No, yeah, we'll get you some to that, but
yeah,
the whole, yeah,
I
you've got to take some time. And this is the other thing too. Think about your interview process. Some firms are just crunching it all together and they're rushing through it. Now you can't go slow because talent is short. But on the flip side, to be fair, you better have a process because I'm going to tell you, if you don't have a process, those that are good will walk away at the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah, then you lose your opportunity.
Yeah, and those are the people you want because probably what you're hiring for is somebody who is process driven, who is accountable and wants you to be accountable, who is professional and wants you to be professional. So that's the person you really wanted.
Agreed. Cool. Well, I'll tell again, I want to remind you, like these are my questions, Jen. I want questions
I
from
know.
yes, I'm going to
We
start.
need, but we need to talk about outsourcing, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think we need to
Yeah,
cover
well,
this one.
that's kind of where we're, so how do we approach the growth, right? So you've
Yeah.
identified that you need a person,
Mm.
with this within this role in your firm. How do we approach that growth? Let's talk about how it's understanding specific role, and what can be outsourced, what can be upgraded internally.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, if you are not writing, okay, so I call, there's a role chart and a responsibilities chart. So think of, okay, I should have brought a little visual. So think of a responsibilities chart like a big whiteboard, right? And you write the sticky notes of all the responsibilities for each role at the firm or each person. You can put the person's name at the top, and then you can move the sticky notes aside of the things nobody wants to do right there. Now, when you're looking at that and you're looking at all those responsibilities, I really do believe you're going to understand that you can't get that in one or two people. And so that's when you start to look at outsourced providers, because if you can't get it in one person and you only have the budget for one hire, then it's pretty black and white at this point. You can't make that hire and try to make them something they're not. So use the outsourcers as an interim, learn off of them of what you really want, at least get some things done and done well, and then you look for the hire.
What if what if you have half a role, right? What if you identify, what if you take your sticky notes and the tasks that nobody wants to do or nobody
Yeah,
has capacity to do?
yeah.
What if that's a 15 or 20 hour a week role?
Mhm.
Uh,
That's another great reason for using outsource providers. Absolutely. Or an intern. I am a little privy to the younger people.
yeah.
You know, there's
Yeah.
some good grads that don't have jobs.
Yeah,
Um,
well, we've got some very task-oriented things internally,
that's
that my kids are getting age where, if we're just making sure that we're checking that technology is
mhm,
functioning, things like that. Um,
that's right.
I'm bringing my kid in for 5 hours a week,
Yeah.
just,
And to that point, you're willing to train. You're
oh
willing
yeah,
to teach the soft skills, self accountability, structure, communication, like all those things, right? If you're not in that position as a firm, you do like literally you waited too long, and that's okay. That's what
yeah,
most
happens.
okay. No judgment on that. Then that might be where you need somebody that comes in who's not going to bring emotion in. You're not going to have to teach them about self accountability or communication, and they have expertise in the area you need.
Yeah,
So they're going to almost be not only just a doer, but a strategic partner. They're going to bring that critical thinking because they've worked with several businesses, seen it done well, not well. So they're going to have an opinion. Now, if you don't want an opinion, then yes, hire an intern and train them.
yeah, yeah. But here's understanding that the experience that an intern gets is very valuable. Um, there's, that is certainly a piece of compensation, if you will. They're probably getting a college credit or two if they're still, if they're still going to school.
Mhm.
Um, I always have a problem with the training and then the departure of an intern.
Yes.
We've done two interns over the years. They were paid internships. I always had a problem bringing somebody in and having them do 10 hours of work a week and then just being like, all right, thanks, see ya. So we did pay for our interns.
Mhm.
My difficulty was great. It's a summer intern, and for 90 days we've got this added help. But then in 90 days we've got a
Mhm.
pretty significant gap, even if it is just 10 hours a week.
Yes.
So that was the difficulty in those two instances.
Right. And that's where when you hire, to be fair, you also want to set expectations for, okay, this is interim, this is temporary, which means I still need to look for the actual hire or outsource provider who's going to overlap with them before they walk out the door.
I almost, just thinking on the fly here, do you follow Gino Wickman's EOS model at all? Yeah, love it, and have been through traction a couple of times, and it's guided a lot. So we talk about quarterly rocks, in that process. I'm always wondering if an intern or an outsource isn't better for a rock than it is for an internal process. Like if you can hand them a project,
Yeah.
has a finite implementation date, and then it's an
Yes.
internal, so um it just
Yes. Much.
because you're
Yes.
spitballing here, right?
Yeah, instead of filling the role where they're building, I'm not going to use the word traction. You're going to all think pun on words there. Where they're building a relationship. So, for example, I would not bring in an intern that was client facing.
Right.
That I knew the intern only had 3 months or maybe even 6 months.
Yeah.
No. That is where you would want an outsourced provider if it's a part-time position. Or listen, I've had friends that have gone and switched careers and they are part-time at a firm because they don't have the experience to be full. And they're like amazing employees doing client service concierge work or something else. So I don't think we can say no to hiring and yes to outsourcing just because it's part-time. I think we have to think about what we want in soft skills. That's
Do you have any real life examples that you can share with us of good or bad?
I can
I've
give you
got,
all mine.
yeah, yeah, I've given a couple of mine.
Yeah.
When we, so this, like starting the business was weird because honestly, it was me and Carmen for maybe the first 90 days before we made our first hire, but our office, and there was, our office was literally our master bedroom in the house we were renting at the time.
Mhm.
Now there was no bedroom furniture in it. There was a conference table and, laptops and a couple of desks and things like that. That was long before value statements. That was long before we had a defined mission. We were still really feeling ourselves out for what this was to become. Um, it was a really difficult time. I mean, we had 4 people coming to work in our master bedroom.
Yeah.
And it was before we could afford an office.
Yeah.
We reverted back to working remote again,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is different this time than it was that time. That was like, if you're early in your business, make sure that you have an established footprint. Like that was a very, very difficult time. People coming, like we were running our business out of our home, and
Yes.
and we were hiring employees that were coming. And again, we started with friends,
Mhm.
so it was easier. But just our environment was not set up for it. Like,
Well, and this is where you have to do this testing. You have to come and see the environment. I mean, when I started out, it was just me. Then I added somebody who was remote. So this was at the time when nobody had remote people. They thought it was crazy. And then when I moved to Massachusetts, I had an office and we literally had like kind of a fake wall between me and somebody else. And at some point he's like, "Oh my God, I can't listen to you anymore." Like you're on the phone so then we actually built out an entire basement floor with 4 offices, a conference room, bathroom, all that. But I had to bring people in to interview and say, is this environment okay for you? So I think that this thing about technical skills is one thing. Okay. That's like check the box. I think it's the soft skills that we probably don't spend enough time on and the culture in a work environment. And that is where we need to lay that out. Now, we're in a state now, to be honest with you. If you we work with a firm, I want to see a video. What's your office look like? What's the entrance look like? Is it our office? Is everybody remote? We have a firm right now, everybody's remote, right? It doesn't matter. Um, I think we need to spend just a little bit more time pre-qualifying the people that we're talking to make sure that they like that environment. And I use just like, I'm big into using outsourced providers. Everybody who knows me knows I'm huge, have this directory, like I'm in love with this. I want them to buy in to our culture and our purpose. Yeah, they may only be doing 5 hours a week, but everybody cares in these days. And I care. People want purpose. They don't want to just check the box most of the time.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we have to find a way to market or to explain our environment and our skills and everything. And then I'll get back to when you do that, you will get the right applicants in the pool, whether they're the outsource provider or they're the hire.
You know that we do, with the work we've done, I've been able to dive into some studies, and um compensation is actually third most important to most people. It is um does it fit? I mean, is their values too, right? Does this
Yes.
company fit their values? And do they have an opportunity to make an impact on the team? So their compensation structure is actually third most important. Generalization here.
No.
But that's actually the third most important criteria
Mhm.
where we all think we can throw money at and get the best professional. Your values, I mean, it works both ways, right? if you don't define your values and your mission and the purpose you bring,
Mhm.
you might be missing good hires too.
Yeah. We did this, we call it the life career mission statement. So we um, hope that our clients, and we do this ourselves, when we're thinking of hiring, we're tasked with filling this out. And it talks about your own mission, like for the roles. How many roles, how many hats is this person wearing? What should their goals be? And it leaves a spot for personal goals, career path, like we draw out the career path, all the responsibilities. Um, I will tell you, when we hand this to the potential hire, and then they start sometimes they'll fill it in advance. It's pretty interesting. Or let's say they get hired, and in the first 30 days it absolutely has to be filled out. Financial debt is incredibly high. So it doesn't surprise me when you say compensation is extremely important, and maybe number 3, it's because of the debt load they're walking in with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the other thing too. In the financial industry, when we think about our clients and what they feel about money, we forget what our employees feel about money and what our outsource providers feel about money.
Yeah, that's an important point.
It
Um,
is because that's how they're going to come to the table and work with you, for you, or manage
yeah,
projects.
yeah. And if you're hiring, if you're hiring a $50,000 CA, depending on what market you're in, that seems
Yeah.
like a crazy number for some markets. And, anyway, if you're hiring a $50,000 CA and they're serving, multi-million dollar clients, there's a big disconnect in mindset there potentially. You might have abundance mindset with a client, but a deficit mindset with your CA. And that's going to be really hard for communication.
Yep.
That's a
I
good.
know one of these great, I do not take credit for this at all. A couple of my past clients, they make the potential hires read a book. Now, I don't know about all you guys, but I'm on Blinkist now, so I'm getting the 25-minute speed read lately because I've got like 20 books I want to read and I just can't read fast enough. But they're making them read a book and come back to them with some key points in the interview process. And usually that book relates to your culture. So some of you might be big into Money Quotient, Soul of Money. Like there's so many different books. Others might be into like we're hardcore biz dev and volume game. Like it, yeah, it's a big. Some might use the traction book. That is the who to hire. If I could tuck that in, it's somebody who maybe likes the content and the things that you believe in. Have read a book and see what they say.
I like that. So,
Hmm.
Jen, I'll kind of wind us down here.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions or any comments on anything we've talked about, please put it in chat or the Q&A. One of the things that I'm going to do uh, before I send the recording out is I'm going to actually summarize our conversation and break it down into bullet points
Okay.
so that we can send that out with the recording as well. We didn't prepare a slide deck for it. In fact, who wants to sit through a PowerPoint, Jen? Nobody.
I know.
So hopefully you find that this conversation format enlightening. But when to hire, right? We talked about workload, we talked about client growth, we talked about revenue,
Mhm.
who to hire beyond the technical skills, right? Is cultural fit,
Yep.
soft skills, and then how to approach your growth. Um, is it an outsource? Is it an internal hire? Is it a promotion? And then you've got to backfill that secondary role. A lot to talk about.
Yeah, it's a lot. So we'll do the Cliff Notes is right.
Yeah.
And for anybody on this call, you all know that I draw pictures, not the prettiest, but they're there. So you should chat in if there's anything that you guys want before we go, because then Charlie will know to ask me and we'll throw it into the Cliff Notes.
And Jen, I'm also putting my email address in the chat in case anybody wants to get a hold of me.
Okay. Smart.
And
Should I be
yeah,
doing the same?
yeah, I want you to do the same, just in case somebody
Okay.
wants to reach out and has some specific questions that they preferred to discuss one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who should be your first hire? Ooh. Um, is it Guadalupe? Is that how you Guadalupe? Could you tell me what the first hire is yourself if you're the owner? So could you tell me what role you don't want to be doing? And then I'll tell you the answer. Mm-hmm. Do you like business development or working with the clients? Yeah. Okay. Then an integrator. So it's somebody who loves like tech and operations and administrative work. So hire, I'll say to you without knowing you at all, this is a risk. You hire an administrative person that wants to be an owner someday.
So does that create some risk?
Absolutely.
Hiring somebody that wants to be an owner if you know there's not an ownership opportunity?
Regardless, that person will push you to go out and do biz dev to be better and will put the systems in place. And if there is no, you don't promise them ownership. You promise them the dream of rising up. That's all you can promise. You don't guarantee it either, right? Yeah.
John Asta, thanks for being here, my man. Peel back the pros and cons of local versus virtual.
Local.
We have
Local, you mean like John on site, like literally sitting next to you, near you? Or local, like as in you could meet up for coffee some days? What do you mean by local? Yeah, meet up for coffee. I
yeah,
figured.
yeah.
Okay. That's a really good question. Well, I think virtual, first of all, there are pros and cons of time zones. Okay. If you're one of those people, like when I started my business, I wanted everyone who ever worked with me to work between 9 and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because I didn't want them pinging me at 7 o'clock at night and then me thinking about that all night or me wanting to respond to them because I knew they were in the groove, like they were working and they were clipping away at stuff. So I instantly felt I had to respond. So that was one of the things that I liked about the local uh, versus the virtual hire was the time zone. The other thing about the local is it is kind of fun to get together for coffee. I think it's really important. And for that person to get a sense of you, I think you'll get more buy-in, more energy from them if you can do local. Now, why did I not do local all the time? I couldn't find the best talent. So the pro of the virtual is the talent is endless.
Yeah. One of the things, Jen, that we do, I have a morning meeting every day, and
Mhm.
our whole team is on that meeting. And it is, I mean, it's down to business, right? We go through all of our help desk tickets and all the tasks for the day and follow up on the stuff that had happened yesterday. And, Monday and Friday are structured a little different because it's more of
Mhm.
what does the week look like versus what does the day look like? But there is always, and it's on Zoom, so we're all seeing each other and having
Yep.
fun and drinking coffee together. Um, there is always time for small talk. There is always time for water cooler talk. There's always time for that feeling of camaraderie that happens outside of your business tasks.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a really important piece of it. So, John, if you're virtual, make sure that you keep that cultural stuff alive. Certainly it can't just be, X's and O's. Um, that you've got to be able to connect, whether it's across the country or offshore, you've got to be able to connect on a level deeper than business.
Yeah, this goes to that absolutely in that communication portion. And a great tip is get the work done on the call, yeah, at the beginning of the call, and then open up to cooler talk. Anybody who wants to hang out in the Zoom room gets to hang. Anybody who wants to like put it on mute and walk around the office or work quietly while the rest are gabbing, go for it.
That's
But
great.
yeah, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, all my people, nobody's here locally for me. And we get together, and then every quarter we actually talk about business goals, things that we're working on, major initiatives. We actually have like a mini company meeting every quarter too. Really important.
I will share that before COVID, pre-COVID, we had we were a team of 13 and we had an office in downtown Daytona Beach. We had two virtual people and everybody else came to the office. And Jen, you know what happened in that situation? I became an HR manager. There was a lot of drama. Um, Not to say the office was a significant expense for the business. But there was I'm so business runs so much more smoothly now because while we do have all the meeting and all the
Mhm.
stuff in the morning, a lot of the personal drama seems to be removed. Also, the virtual roles are task roles. They're task related roles, so I can measure, and I'm not worried about how many hours a task took. What I'm worried about is, was that task done? Was it done well? Was it done on time? And so for me, if it's a virtual role, like if I had somebody in a CA role virtually, that might scare me a little bit.
Yes.
Whereas now that it's kind of back of house, task related roles, operational stuff,
Mhm.
it's easier to monitor, and it's easier to monitor that it's done and that it's done well.
Yep.
So I think, John, maybe to that point, the different roles might be, might be positioned differently as far as local or virtual.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Jen, this is awesome. I thank you again for being here and sharing your wisdom. I mean, you've worked with so many firms and in operational and business consultant roles that you've done a ton of this stuff, more than I have. I
A lot
can,
of story. Well, we have a lot of stories between the two of us. That's all we need to tell the crew.
yes, some
Yeah.
we can share and some we can.
Yeah. And
Um,
don't be shy, you guys. Like reach out to Charlie, reach out to me, ask those questions you didn't want to ask on a public chat because there's no bad question. Trust me. We've seen a lot.
yeah, no stupid questions, just stupid people. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I'm just kidding. All right, that was a terrible thing to say. So I will tomorrow I'll get out recording. Jen, I'll get you obviously the list of people who registered. So if you want to get a personal email out to them, then that'd be great also. And as always, those people who show up for these webinars month in and month out, I hope this is a good topic. If you have suggestions for topics or people I should host in the future, I'm always open to that stuff. So it really it awes me the number of people who take an hour out of their day to hang out and learn something new and continue to grow in their profession and get better. So that's pretty cool. Thank you all for taking a little time today. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to sign out, Jen. Thanks for being here.
Bye, guys.